I am my Pink Drink, and I am ready to talk about the books that I read in January. Hey everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my first wrap-up of 2019. So today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in January, and I think I read about 8 books, which is pretty good. This month I actually read a lot of audiobooks and ebooks, which is kind of different for me. I normally stick to physical books, but I really got into Scribd this month, and I ended up listening to, I think, like, the majority of the books that I read were audiobooks, so it was really fun. I really love audiobooks. So the first book that I read, I actually read while I was at Disneyland in the beginning of the month, and that was All She Wants for Christmas by Amy Rose Bennett, and it's a short little novella, and it's a romance, and it's set during Christmas. Because it was the last day of the holiday decorations, so it kind of felt like the perfect novella to read while I was like in line for different rides. It ended up being actually really good. I was genuinely surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I don't normally read adult romance, it's just not my kind of thing. However, I have found a few different adult romances that I've actually enjoyed, which is really, really nice because my last year goal in 2018 was to read more adult, and I ended up really not doing that. So it's kind of nice to start off the year in 2019 actually finishing one of my goals from last year. So basically, All She Wants for Christmas is kind of like a hate to love trope. It's kind of like a marriage of convenience sort of trope, but it like, I don't know, it really worked for me for some reason. I think it's the hate to love aspect of it, is that they didn't really get along at first, but then through different circumstances that like they're not really out of their control. It's just like, I guess you could call it like a marriage of propriety if you want to like make it more technical. I'm really bad at explaining this plot. Basically it's this girl, she's kind of bookish, and then it's a guy and he's like more rugged, and they don't really get along, but they end up getting married because she is found kissing that guy or whatever, and they're like, you know, to save face you have to get married, because this is like set in I think like the 1800s or 1800s. I think it's 1800s. See, I'm really bad at explaining this plot. I just kind of read it because I think it was like a free novella and I didn't really have anything else to read, so it wasn't like I set out to read this book. It just kind of happened, and I ended up really enjoying it. And I don't know, it was just a fun read. There wasn't really any like literary merit to it or anything, but that's totally fine because I just wanted something fun to read while I was in line of It's a Small World. Like, sue me. And the next book I read was actually my first audiobook on Scribd, and that was kind of like one that I wasn't really expecting to read again, but it just ended up catching my eye and I didn't really know what else to read, so I just chose this audiobook, and it was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. And I've talked about this book a little bit like on Twitter, and I think maybe I brought it up in a YouTube video, I'm not sure, but I ended up reading this book, and it's basically about this girl, I think she's like 25-ish, 26, and she gets laid off from her job, and then she finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her, and then she finds out that her dad is dying from cancer. So she ends up going to book a ticket to Alaska where her dad is and going to see him and kind of trying to rekindle their relationship after not really talking for like decades. And basically her mom left Alaska, I think, when she was really little, so she never really had a solid relationship with her father. She ended up growing up with a stepfather whom she really loves, so she ends up going to Alaska, and she's kind of out of her element because she's kind of more of a city girl, and she likes, you know, fashion and makeup and stuff like that. I think she runs like a popular Instagram page, and so she's kind of out of her element, but I really enjoyed her character because she feels more realistic and not so much like the stereotypical like airheaded, you know, arrogant, whatever kind of girl, like a Sharpay, I guess. She doesn't feel like that. She feels more like normal and down to earth, but like still she's just not like an outdoorsy person. And I could really relate to her because, you know, like she still lives at home, she doesn't really drive, she, you know, she likes fashion and that's like totally me. But I really actually enjoyed this book. It's also a hate to love as well. It's kind of a long audiobook. I think it was like 12 hours long. So it was, you know, it was a pretty good sized audiobook, and I actually genuinely liked it. I liked the writing, I liked the characters, I liked the relationship that formed. I liked that it wasn't solely about the romance. It also had a really good subplot, or just like other plot, like with her dad and his cancer and stuff like that. I think that all of that was really woven in well together throughout the whole book. So it wasn't just one thing, and it wasn't just this thing, it was both. And I feel like the reason I've been really nervous to get into romance books is because I normally don't like sex scenes in books, but this one was done really well, and I actually didn't totally hate it or like want to skip it. So I think that that's kind of like a good mark for that book. And yeah, I just really liked the atmosphere and the setting. I've never read any book set in Alaska, so that was kind of a cool thing, and I definitely recommend it if you're looking for any sort of hate to love trope, and if you're just looking for like a good romance to get into, especially if you're new to romance. I think this is a good one to kind of like dip your toes into the water and see if you end up liking romance and if you want to try other ones. So I definitely recommend this one. Also, I'm pretty sure I gave both All She Wants for Christmas and The Simple Wild both 4 out of 5 stars. The next book is my first 5-star read of the month, and that is Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. And that was another audiobook I listened to from Scribd, and it was so good. The audiobook itself wasn't the best audiobook I've ever listened to. I didn't really like Josh's narrator. However, it really didn't detract too much from my enjoyment of the book. I ended up really, really loving it. And everyone is so right. It is definitely like a New Girl-esque kind of book. Like, Hazel is definitely a lot like Jess from New Girl. So I really liked that comparison because I do love New Girl. It's one of my favorite shows. So I ended up really liking and identifying with Hazel. And then Josh actually reminded me of Josh from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So it kind of worked out. It was like 2 of my favorite shows in one book, and it was just so perfect, and it worked so well. And I don't know, there was just something about this book that was really, it really hit me right here in the heart, and I just loved it. And I'm so glad that I listened to everyone's recommendation for this book. And I would actually be really interested in reading more of Christina Lauren's work because I feel like they're probably really good at writing romance, and I don't know, there's definitely a lot of other of their books that I have found kind of intriguing. So maybe I will try out more of their audiobooks. I know they have a lot of them on Scribd, so that's really good. And yeah, basically Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating is these 2 people that kind of like are opposites. It's not hate to love, but it's definitely like an opposites attract kind of thing. They become good friends, and then they try to set each other up on dates, and it like they just don't work out, and they don't work out. So it's a really cool plot. It's kind of basic, but it's a really sweet story, and I totally recommend either trying it out on audiobook or even reading it physically. If you can get over Josh's narrator, then I think you'll be fine with the audiobook. And the next book I read was actually my first physical book of the month, and it's actually on this little stack behind me, but I don't really want to get it out because it's on the bottom, and that was The Wicked King by Holly Black, and I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. I actually enjoyed this book so much more than The Cruel Prince. It's the sequel to The Cruel Prince. I'm sure everyone knows that, but just in case you are new here, then yes, there's The Cruel Prince and then The Wicked King. And I actually genuinely liked The Wicked King like 10 times more than The Cruel Prince. Like, don't get me wrong, I loved The Cruel Prince and it was such a good book, but The Wicked King really surpassed that for me, and I ended up really loving it for some reason. I don't know why. The writing wasn't really any different from The Cruel Prince, but there's just something about the second book that really got to me and really hooked me in, and I absolutely freaking loved it so much. Like, I love Jude and I love Cardan and I love just like, well, actually, you know what, those are the only 2 people I love in this story. Taryn is still awful. What's new? Locke is still awful. That's not surprising. So I ended up really loving this book. There's not too much I can say about the story because I don't want to spoil anything. But just go read The Cruel Prince and then read The Wicked King, and then we can talk about it all the time. I'm like so down to talk about The Wicked King. The next book I read was another audiobook, and that was A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahada Mafi. And this was a book I wasn't intending on reading, especially not on audiobook, but then they had it on Scribd and I just could not resist. I think it was a pretty short audiobook as well, so I felt like I could get it done really fast, and I fell in love with it, and I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I ended up loving it. I know I'm saying love it a lot, so sorry about that, but I had heard some like kind of mixed or negative reviews about this book, and so I was a little wary going into it. However, I ended up really, really loving it and loving the main character, and I loved the romance that took place. Like, I feel like Tejada Mafi really knows how to write romances that I'm going to like fall head over heels for. And it was just so good and heartwarming and sweet, but then it also talked about a lot of really good issues having to do with like Muslims in America, specifically post 9/11, and it was just so well done, and I could really see a lot of Tejada in it. And it was just, I loved it. I love the main character. She's super into fashion and breakdancing, and she has a really quick tongue and isn't always sunshine and butterflies all the time, so that was really nice. I love teen characters where they're not like super sweet 24/7, where they're kind of more realistic. And I don't know, I just fell in love with that book. I had nothing, like, there's nothing wrong with it for me. Like, it just hit every single mark that I wanted it to hit, and nothing felt incomplete. And it also has one of my favorite things is kind of like a realistic ending where it's not like super happy, but also not sad. It's just there. It's just like an ending. It's just real, you know? So I really love contemporaries that have a super realistic ending. They just do it for me. It's like always automatic 5 stars if it has a realistic ending. The next audiobook that I read this month was one that I ended up rating, I think, 3 out of 5 stars, and it was kind of a disappointing read, and that was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. It was a really fast audiobook. I think it's like 4 hours long, and so it's super, super fast, and I got through it, and it was actually kind of engaging. However, I felt like it wasn't developed enough, like the characters weren't developed enough, the world wasn't developed enough, and specifically the story wasn't developed enough. It seemed too easy, it seemed really predictable, and I had kind of already figured it out by like really, really early into like the actual like plot of the story. And I don't know, I'm still trying to decide if I want to move on with this series or if I just want to kind of like drop it from here and not really get into it. So it's like, it's kind of a decision that I have to make because I know that they have more of the audiobooks on Scribd and they're super short. So either I can just read those and just get it over with and see if I end up liking any of the other books, or I can just move on from the series and find something different to read. I'm still not sure. I did really enjoy the audiobook as like the narrator was really good and it was really intriguing to listen to it as like an audiobook instead of reading it, and I think I liked it more because it was an audiobook. However, I just felt like the book needed to be at least like twice as long than it was. It just didn't feel like I had enough of the characters or the plot to really enjoy this book the way I should have. Another book I read this month was actually a reread, and that was A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro, and I absolutely loved this reread. As you can see, I did start to tab up the book, and then about halfway through I just like gave up and just read the book because I was kind of, you know, I was cutting it close a little bit. So I really wanted to finish this in January, and I did, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I feel like I loved it even more the second time, like more than just the first time, because I felt like I actually got so much more out of it during this reread. Like, I noticed things that I didn't notice before. Just like, this story is so intricate, and it's like more intricate than it gets credit for, and things that are in like the third book are like from the first book. Like, there's so many like parallels and like things that like call back to other books or whatever, and it just works so well. And I love these characters. I love Jamie, I love Charlotte. You guys know how much I love this book so much. I really enjoyed this. 5 out of 5 stars. Y'all know I love this book. And the very last book that I read in January was Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare, and I read that for my We Read the Bard book club. And so if you're not a member of that book club, it's okay. You can always go and follow the Twitter. I'll leave a link down below. We read a Shakespeare play once a month, and January's play play was Much Ado About Nothing, which is one of my all-time favorite Shakespeare plays. I think it's probably my second favorite. It might be, I might like it more than Romeo and Juliet, but I'm not sure. My top 3 are all kind of a tie. And so I also did a live show on Much Ado About Nothing, so if you want to know my thoughts on the play, go and watch that. It's on my channel. I'll link it down below. And I absolutely love this play. I feel like if you're not really into Shakespeare, you should probably try to read this one because A, it's super easy. The comedy is really modern, and so are the characters. The characters are super modern, and so is the plot. Like, everything about this play is super modern. So if you're kind of wary about Shakespeare, you don't know if you want to get into it or not, or you don't think that you'll be able to understand it, I definitely recommend trying Much Ado About Nothing. The first scene is like absolutely perfect. It's really, really relatable and really, really accessible. So yeah, definitely try it out. If you ever have like any questions about Shakespeare, you can always come to me and I'll try my hardest to answer it. And yes, I totally recommend reading that play. It is so, so good. 5 out of 5 stars. All right, so that was my entire January wrap up. That was a little messy. It didn't really go how I expected it to, but it's okay. It's totally fine. I feel like it's a lot harder for me to talk about books when I'm not holding them right in my hand for some reason. So talking about audiobooks and ebooks is really, really difficult for me. But I hope that I got all of my thoughts across and how much I love these books, or maybe didn't like them so much. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, like this video, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!